All right, now tonight we're getting ready to look in John's the 6th chapter, and it appears that Jesus is getting ready to go back to Galilee. When I say it appears, well, he is getting ready to go back, but you'll see what I mean by this in here. So now then, as we look at this, here's what we have found in here so far. Here's what I want you to do. Open your Bible and look at what is happened between chapter 5 and chapter 6. In other words, you look there and you see, okay, you go out of chapter 5, and here it is, he's getting ready to go into Galilee, and in chapter 6, and then you get down to about verse 4, and he's getting ready to go back to Jerusalem. And so you would think, okay, not much has happened in there. But there is a whole year, that's what I want you to see. There is a whole year that takes place between chapters 5 and chapter 6. And this is when Jesus goes back up to Galilee, and he spends a whole year there. And if you want to read about that, where would you go? See? Everybody knows by now you're going to Matthew, Mark, and Luke. You're going to the synoptics to fill in there, because they're the ones that give you all of the information about the Galilean ministry in here. But we are studying the book of John, and that is what is happening down in Jerusalem there. So now, here we've got, again, our chart up there, and we've studied so far now the first year. We get down there, now then, in chapter 6 and verse 4, it says the Passover is at hand. So that means there has been a year since we closed last week in chapter 5, and opening this week in chapter 6, there's been a year in Jesus' life that he's been doing things. And he's been doing things that I've got written down in there that you would go and you'd look at many, many chapters in the synoptics. Now, this is a one-year Galilean ministry that is there. We're not going to be studying that, but I want you to see how it fits in. I don't want you to study in here in the book of John and think, okay, he went up here, then he went up there, and then he went right back down here, then he went over here, and then where did all of these other things happen that's in here? Now, we're going back up into Galilee tonight, and I want to use this to try to get you acquainted a little bit with the area in which he's going to be talking about. As you see up there, I've got the feeding of the 5,000 that's going to be up there in the right-hand corner. They're going to get in a boat and going to head back over to Capernaum. His disciples are. They're going to head out that way, only it doesn't work, and the water blows them off, and they're going to get off course, and they're going to get out in the middle of the lake, fighting it in the middle of the night, and Jesus is going to be walking along on water, and he's going to meet them in the middle of the lake. Now, as soon as he gets in the boat, all of a sudden, they're going to be on the shore down there in the direction that they're going. Now, all of this you'll find not in the book of John, but you'll find it in the synoptics there. So if you're wondering about when these things happen, I'm just trying to give you a little perspective there on it. Now, he will take off. He'll go back up the coastline and head back up to Capernaum, where he was going to go before. And tonight, in a little while, we'll talk about all of these things. He's going down, then he goes back up, and on his way up, he heals many, many people on his way up there. Now, as you're looking at this map, I want you to kind of look in here in this respect here. Is there? Yeah, okay, we got it. As you can see over here, see this? It comes out faded white, I guess, in here. This is a mountainous area, and I'm going to show it to you in just a minute. I want you to see that the Sea of Galilee lays in a big basin, and there's mountains around about it. So this over in here is a mountain. You look over in here, and this over in here is mountains in here. And so you come down these mountains, and you get into the Sea of Galilee then. Now, as you're coming over here into this area, I'm going to show you some pictures of what it is like. But now the first one in here is going to be, if you're down here from this area right in here, and you look up, now you're going to be looking up this way, this where this mountain, the next mountain right in here is going to be. So now here is where we're down here. Here's the Sea of Galilee where we're standing. And we're looking up here at this mountain. The mountain is called Mount Arbel. And I want to show you how sharp that mountain comes off. And there's a reason for all of these things. It's to kind of get us a familiarity with us. But you remember when Jesus walked on the water, was there a storm out there or not? See? And it came up, and you can see, when you see some of these things, you can see why these winds are going to be like this. Okay, there it is, as you're looking at that mountain. You see how sharp it is when you come up to the peak of it. So you're up there and you look at it, and bing, down it goes in there. I think I told you here the other night that you could stand up there, and there's a car that's down there at the bottom. Somebody rolled it off, and it just goes all the way to the bottom there. Now, here's that mountain that comes down, and Galilee, the Sea of Galilee, is right down below that mountain. So these are just to kind of show you where it is. Now we're standing back up here on Mount Arbel and looking down at the Sea of Galilee. So as you look down at the Sea of Galilee that's in there, well, there's another in there. I hope we get back to the one that I was wanting to show you right here. I thought I cut off a lot of these. Okay, back here in chapter 6 now. We're up here on that. And over there, Jesus is going to take off from Capernaum, and he's going to go over, and in that area, he'll be feeding the 5,000. Then after he feeds the 5,000, they're going to be coming across the lake, and they're going to land over here in this particular area. Then these boats, these people from Tiberia, they're going to hear that there's 5,000 people over there, and so they're going to run over to give them some cab rides. In other words, they're going over to pick up some tolls to tell them they'll take them back over by boat then. So they're going to go over there. We'll read about that that's in there. Now, Jesus, his apostles, they'll bring him over by that line that I've got right in there. Now, Jesus and his apostles will go up this way. And as they go up, they're going to be healing people as they get in. They're going back up into Capernaum. Now, when they get up to Capernaum, in the synagogue there at Capernaum, that's where we are in chapter 6, see? So we're going to be covering some territory there. And then we get in here, and this speech that he's going to be giving in chapter 6 then takes place at that point. Let's look at some things that happened during this period of time. You're wondering, well, what all has Jesus done? Here's some things he's done that we haven't studied about because we're studying the book of John. Now, he's going into the desert place. He's feeding 5,000. He's walked on water. Multitudes following him. He's given a discourse on spiritual bread. He withdrew unto Tyre and Sidon. He healed that Canaanitish woman's daughter. He went to the Decapolis. He healed the deaf, fed the 4,000. Peter's confession. Peter made that great confession. Going up on the Mount of Transfiguration. He caught that fish and paid the taxes for the fish and all of these things that are in there. And you can see these things around here that it goes like this. So he went around, and there's where he was in that desert place, and he's now going to feed the 5,000. They're headed over, going to end up down in that area. He's going to go back up into Sidon. He's going to come back down in there, over into the Decapolis. Now the Decapolis is that white spot that I've put on that side. Then he's going back up about 30 miles north for Peter to make that great confession. Then they'll come back down, and they get back down, and then he's going to catch that fish, pay the taxes. And am I making the point? In other words, not trying to show you in any particular order, but to let you see how many things have taken place between chapters 5 and 6, you see? And so if you wanted to study it all, then you'd have to go back into the synoptics and look at it like that. Now, that's just part of it. I mean, you look at the other things here that he's done. He called James and John and Andrew and Peter. They'd already followed him, but they've gone back fishing, so he calls them again. He called Matthew and then had that party in his house. He's preached the Sermon on the Mount. He's healed a man in the synagogue. He's healed Peter's mother-in-law. He healed a man that was let down through the roof. He's called his 12 and made apostles out of them. He's healed a centurion's servant. He's raised the widow's son from death. He's preached throughout the country. He stilled the tempest, that wind that came down. He healed the demoniacs across the lake. He has healed Jairus' daughter, 2 blind men. He sent out the 12, 2 by 2. He's heard that John was beheaded, and then he crossed the sea. So do you see why I ask you to read between chapter 5 and chapter 6 and see all the stuff that's in there? it ain't there. But it's in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And so that's why I made that big thing when I was introducing this about John deals with things down in Judea, but the synoptics deal with things up around Galilee. Now right now, Jesus is up around Galilee. So right now, we're ready to start into chapter 6, and we're going to see now what he's getting ready to do here in this chapter 6 now as we go. Okay, that's all I'm going to use that tonight for, so if you want to cut this off up there and save the ball, boy, that's fine with me. So now, as we start in chapter 6, he said, "Now after these things, Jesus went away at the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which is by the Sea of Tiberias." It has both of those names. "And a great multitude followed him, because they beheld the signs which he did on them that were sick. Jesus went up into the mountain, and there he sat with his disciples." Now, to give us a little preliminary, in the synoptics we learn there's two reasons why he went over there and went up into the mountains to take a little rest. He has just heard that John has been beheaded. Now, he had heard that John had been thrown in prison. Remember when he went back up the last time. Now then, John has been beheaded, and his disciples that he sent out have just come back, and they've finished their first preaching tour. And so he's taking them over. They go up the mountains. Now the Passover, the feast of the Jews, was at hand. So it's almost time to leave and go back down to Jerusalem. See, that's how we know it's been a year in this period of time here. So it's almost time to go back. So this will put us in April again here. In verse 5, "Jesus therefore, lifting up his eyes, and seeing that a great multitude cometh unto him, saith unto Philip." Here this great multitude is headed out to try to catch him because of the healings that's there. Now it's in the evening in there, and he's going to ask Philip in here, where can we buy bread to feed these people? Because it's evening time, they've traveled 5-6 hard miles to get over there to catch him. Now, what are we going to do with all these people? We need to give them something to eat. Now, we're told in here that he knew what he was getting ready to do. He's just testing Philip to see what Philip will say. Now, a lot of times we put a lot of emphasis, we put a lot of emphasis on how many basketfuls of fish or bread was left over. Anybody tell me how many basketfuls they picked up? Bet everybody in here knows how many they picked up. 12 basketfuls at the end of this. We say, wow, boy, that's a whole lot. Let's go back and talk just a little bit here about how much it started with. I was thinking tonight, I don't think I've ever emphasized this, but had I been Philip and standing there, and here we're clear out in the country, and here comes 5,000 people. And Jesus said, how are we going to get bread to feed them? Now, I know what would happen to my wife if I walked in and said, honey, I've got 6 friends out here in the parking lot, and I want you to feed them dinner today. You see, she would faint. What do you say if you had 5,000 people, you see, that we're getting ready to feed? Well, Philip is going to look out, and Philip is going to say, Lord, if we had 200 shillings, we couldn't feed them. Now, that means nothing to us. But as you break it down, a shilling was a day's wage, and that's about $50,000. That's what he said in our nomenclature. Lord, if we had $50,000, we wouldn't have enough to feed them. Now, to give you an idea, if you were going to have a party and you're going to feed somebody in there, how much per head would you expect it to cost? If I told you I wanted to have a party and we're going to have 100 people over, and I want you to go get the food, we want to feed them, what would you expect? What would you tell me I'd have to pay per person? What's that? $10. I think that's a good. All right, $10 times 5,000 is how many? That's going to come up about $50,000. I think he hit the nail right on the head that's in there. Why, we couldn't even feed them for $50,000. Now, let's break up another thing. Here it is, he's going to get the bread. Now, we're going to find this little boy, of course, has these 5 little loaves, And a loaf of bread was, in those days, was kind of like the bread that you have in your communion here Sunday morning. It's a round loaf, kind of like Mexicans would make tortillas, only it'd be maybe as thick as my thumb, my finger, something like this. And so that's what they would call. We would call it more a slice of bread or something of this nature. But now, how many of those would it take to feed a man? Oliver, if you've been walking for 5 miles and all of that, how much would you want to eat that night? How many of them? 6 or 8. Let's just give him 5. But we got to give him 6 or 8 because Jesus is going to feed them until they're totally full and they can't eat anymore. He's going to emphasize about this. But now, get it so we can work the math. Let's see how we would work the math. Now, we got 5,000 men besides women and children. So now, 5,000 times 5 loaves for Oliver is how many? 2,500, right? 2,500 loaves. Now, if he's going to have, he wants his 6 or 8, then we're going to have to put in another 5,000 times 2, let's say. So we've got to put in another 10,000. So 35,000 we would have to have. Then how many are we going to need for the women and children? I don't know. You want to put in another, what, half that much or a third that much? It doesn't make any difference. What are we up to, 30,000? Let's just say 35,000. Suppose I send you down and tell you, I want you to go down and pick up 35,000 of those things down here at Safeway. I want to know the size of truck that you would take with you. Now, that would boil down, if you want to think of it a little bit more in our area, about a half a loaf of bread. So now, if it's 35,000, suppose I ask you to go down and pick me up 1,750 loaves of. No, it's not. Am I out of my way here? Yes, 25,000. And so, if you, I'm trying to convert this. We've got up to about 35,000. With women and children. I'm trying to convert it in today's nomenclature. And each person would eat, let's say 7, 8 slices, like he's talking about a half a loaf of bread. What's a half of 35,000? That's right, 17,000. I was saying 1,700. Run down and pick me up, Steve, 17,000 loaves of bread. How big a truck would you need? Why, stop to think about it. See, of the size of a truck you would need to get 17,000 loaves of bread if you're going to pick it up in a truck and up there. And Jesus asked Philip, where are we going to get the bread to feed these people? Do you see why Philip didn't say, oh, nothing to it, Lord? You see? This is a big thing. And as I read through, a lot of times I like to stop and put myself there and think, because we just go over it. How did that impact Philip? How did that impact the apostles? See? What was it? So I want you to think now, as we're getting ready to feed these 5,000 people. You've heard this story 1,000 times. Oh yeah, here it is. He fed the 5,000, picked up 12, blah, blah, so let's get on with it. And that's what we're going to do. But I want you to think what an impact that was to those people. How big a miracle was that? For him to create what we would understand about 17,000 loaves of bread and feed these people, plus all those fish. In other words, was this a little miracle, you see? And so this is what is happening there. So now then, he said, Philip tells him, Philip tells him, if everybody just took a little bit, it would take that much, you see, that's in there. So one of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, saith unto him, there is a lad here, and that word lad in the Greek means a little boy. There's a little boy here that hath 5 barley loaves. He has 5 of these little slices right in here, and 2 fishes. And these would be fishes about the size of a sardine. So he has 5 of these little things and 2 in his lunch that his mama has got him in here. So now then Jesus is going to take this, but he said, what's so many there? So Jesus asked him, he said, make the people sit down. So they went out on the grass in that place and set the people down in numbers there, about 5,000. Jesus therefore took the loaves. Now, if you go to the other synoptics, he set them down by 50s. He'd take 50 men. Say, you guys here, 50 more, here 50 more, 50 more, 50 more. Set them down so they could keep track of this thing. In other words, it's not going to be just a jumbled mess of where nobody knows what's going on. But over here's this group, here's this group, here's this group, and it's going to be brought down then in these 50 men here. So what would that be? 100 different groups that is around there. And so he set them down, and then he took the food, took the loaves, and having given thanks, he distributed them that were set down, likewise also the fishes, as much as they wanted. So he went by and he took all the bread, these 5 little loaves, and he gave them. How much you want? How much you want, Oliver? Here it is, here and here. And went around to 5,000 people with these little things and broke it off and gave them all that they could eat, and took these 2 little sardines and did the same thing so you can have all the bread and all the fish that you want. See? And so after they got through, they did the same way we do. They took too much. And then he said, now pick up what's left over. And they picked up 12 basketfuls, see, of what was left over. Now, what's the purpose of miracles? Let's go back to this again. See, and Jesus is here to show he's the Christ, and has he produced a miracle that's just awe-inspiring? See, on this thing? Okay, so they gathered this up. Now then in verse 14, when therefore the people saw the sign, that's a miracle which he did, they said, this is of a truth the prophet that cometh into the world. Now, Moses had prophesied in Deuteronomy 18:15, where God had said that I'm going to raise up another prophet like unto you. And when he comes, you hear him. So the Jews were looking for another prophet who was also a lawgiver, just like Moses was. And when this new prophet, this new lawgiver that they call the Messiah, when he comes, the Jews were to turn and hear him. So these Jews are saying, this has to be him. This must be the prophet. Now Jesus knew what was in their mind, what they were talking about. They were really impressed. And Jesus, therefore, perceiving that they were about to come and take him by force to make him a king, withdrew again into the mountain himself alone. So Jesus knew that they were so overwhelmed that they had determined this has to be the Messiah, he has to be our king, and they were negotiating together and planning on kidnapping him and forcing him to become their king. We're going to set up this new kingdom. Did these Jews have an idea of a physical kingdom? You see that they've got this thing. And so it was going to be by force, and so Jesus is going to escape. Now here's an interesting thing, by the way. In all this premillennial doctrine, that you hear, when you ask them, now, why didn't Jesus set up his kingdom when he came the first time, like Daniel and all of them said he would? They said he intended to, but he couldn't set it up because the Jews rejected him. Well, this has been a good place for him to go ahead and done it, wouldn't it? You see, that's in there. This says just the opposite of what those people say. So he then escaped and went back up into the mountain. Now, here's the interesting thing that happens there. And when evening came, his disciples went down into the sea. So now he's going to send them down. He's going to send them back home, is what he's doing. And they entered into the boat, and they were going over the sea unto Capernaum. And it was now dark, and Jesus had not yet come to them. The sea was rising by reason of a great wind that blew. Stop. All these other people are spending the night. See, all these other people are spending the night there. And they're looking for Jesus to come back down. They're waiting on Jesus. His disciples come down, get in a boat. He's not with them. They take off. That's okay. Jesus is still here. But then during the night, they're trying to get over there. So they have a couple hours rowing time. And all of a sudden, this wind came over. That's the reason I showed you these cliffs. This wind came over, and it's a common occurrence there, and stirred up the sea, and they couldn't make the way into Capernaum. And so they're out there. we'll learn that they were out there about 3.5 miles, 2.5 to 3.5 miles, and the lake is about 7 miles wide at this point. So they were out in the middle of the lake, professional fishermen, men used boats all the time, and they couldn't make any headway. So 19. When therefore they had rowed about 25 or 30 furlongs, which is 3.5 miles, and they saw Jesus walking on the sea and drawing nigh unto the boat, and they were afraid. Now, in this big mist, you're trying to get over to Capernaum, but you can't get, you're blowing off course, you're out in the middle of the sea, you can't make any headway. 12 men, experienced fishermen, are fighting this thing, and it's, we learn from the other Gospels, what time was it now? They left in the evening, and it's in the fourth watch. It's between 3 and 6 o'clock a.m. See? Do you think these guys might be scared? Do you think they might be in trouble as they're seeing themselves out there in this little boat? And then they look up and they see Jesus, at least somebody, walking on water. Now, before you just brush that off, you've heard that story 1,000 times. What would you think if you were out in the sea, you were about to drown, you couldn't control the boat, you had been fighting it all night, and you look up and you saw a person walking on the sea? Not just on a nice calm sea, but on a sea that is so rough that you can't row your boat. What would you have any thoughts? And they were afraid. I can't imagine. I'd just be totally terrified. But he saith unto them, It is I, be not afraid. So he just called out and let them know, it's nothing, it's I, be not afraid. They were willing, therefore, to receive him into the boat. They doubted it to start with, but they said, well, we'll let him get in, you see. Now, the other synoptics, they tell us what they thought he was. What was it? A ghost. That can't be a real man. It has to be a ghost. And he says, it's I. Now, would you let a ghost get in the water, in the boat with you, if you were out there in all of this kind of trouble, you see? But he calms them and he said, it's I. And, well, then, okay, come on and get in the boat then. And straightway, the boat was at the land where they were going. So as soon as he stepped in the boat, they were out in that lake about 3.5 miles. They'd been rowing all night long. And immediately, the boat was ping! On land right where they were headed. See? It was down there. Now, they were off course, weren't they? See? They were going to Capernaum, but they were off course. But that in itself is a miracle. The storm's over. There's no more fighting tonight. Just, we get in, and bing! And there it is. They're all on the land, you see. Now, have these guys been through something? Have they seen some miracles? Are people being presented with evidences, you see, that he's the Christ? Now, back then, these people stayed all night back on the shore, and on the morrow the multitude that stood on the other side of the sea saw that there was no other boat there save one, and that Jesus had entered not with his disciples into the boat, but that his disciples went away alone. Now, they're back over there, and the light came, and there's no other boat. There hadn't been any other boat over there, and the only boat that was there, his disciples took, so they knew where that was. Jesus didn't go with them, but Jesus is gone. They're looking all around, and they can't find Jesus. So they want to find him. Now, Jesus has landed this boat right over by Tiberias, you see. You remember when we were saying he had to walk around in there? So the boat goes ding over by Tiberias, and those guys over there then did as any cab drivers would do today. What would a cab driver do if they heard there's all of a sudden there's 5,000 people up here in Everett that needed to get to Seattle? You suppose there'd be any cabs headed up that way? So that's what it is, 5,000 people. So they took all their boats, zoom, crossed over there hire them out to take them over to Capernaum that's over there. It said, howbeit, there came boats from Tiberias nigh unto the place where they ate the bread after the Lord had given thanks. And when the multitude saw that Jesus was not there, neither his disciples, they themselves got into the boat and came to Capernaum seeking Jesus. So they hired these boats and went back. And when they found him on the other side of the sea, they said unto him, Rabbi, when camest hither? When did you leave? When did you get out of there? We didn't see you. When did you do that? So they want to start a conversation. Jesus is not going to start this conversation. Here's where he's going to start one of the most amazing sermons that you've ever heard. Jesus answered them and said, Verily, verily. Now this is the Greek way of saying, I'm saying unto you, I'm saying unto you, or it is true, it is true. In other words, it's a very emphatic way of saying this. Verily, verily, I say unto you, you seek me not because you saw signs, but because you ate of the loaves and were filled. You people are not seeking me because you saw the signs and saw what I can do and accept me as the Messiah, but you're seeking me because I fed you and filled your belly. That's the reason you're seeking me. It's physical. Then he says, Work not for the food that perisheth, but for the food which abideth unto eternal life, which the Son of Man shall give unto you. For him the Father of even God hath sealed. And so, I was going to say, did I miss a verse up there? No, I don't guess I did. Yeah. Okay. So he just goes right into it, and now he talks about food. All right, now you can think about how similar this is to chapter 4 with the woman at the well. When Jesus went to the woman of the well, did he use water in any way to show what he could do? How if you ask me and I give you water, you would never thirst, but it would spring up inside you unto eternal life, you see? Now he's going to do the same thing with food. He's dealing with these people here with food, and he's going to be telling them, now you had food, but don't work for that kind of food. Work for the kind of food that I can give you. They said, therefore, unto him, What must we do that we may work the works of God? Okay, what do you want us to do? We want to work the works of God where we can get this. Jesus answered and said unto them, This is the work of God, that you believe on him whom he hath sent. Now there is an important verse, and you need to remember that verse for the rest of this chapter, because that's going to set the tone. And then you'll get your answer on down at the end of the chapter. But this sets the tone for the chapter. Here is the work of God. Here's what I'm after you for, that you may believe on him whom God hath sent. That's the work of God. That's the job, is to totally believe on Jesus, is what he's saying. So now everything he says is going now to be to try to solidify the idea of you must live by faith. You must have this faith. You must believe in Jesus. Now, when he says that, they understand so far, just like the woman at the well did. You remember what the woman at the well's answer was when they said, when he said, I give you this water and you'd never thirst? Yeah? Well, Lord, give me the water, but you know, can you get water that Jacob couldn't even get? I mean, this well is down there 75 feet deep, and you don't have a rope. And are you saying that you could get the well water out of there? You see? So she was mystified. These people are now mystified. Okay, now you're telling us to get this bread that we can't, that eternal life, that we may believe in you. And so now they're going to start confronting him about this. Now here's the way it goes. Now, what you have to do is you look at their answer. When you just read their answer and go back and forth real fast, you don't see it. But it's like if I walked up and saw Steve and Oliver right in the middle of their conversation in there, and I come up and I hear them arguing. Could I stand and listen and figure out what they're arguing about? See? Well, certainly I could. See? Certainly I could. And so I say, here, a little while, oh, okay, this is what Oliver wants, this is what Steve wants. Yeah, okay, I see now what they're talking about. Now, as you look at this, here's what's happening. The Jews are going to challenge Jesus just like the woman at the well challenged him. And their challenge is this. They're all looking for the Messiah. But when the Messiah comes, when this prophet comes, that they're looking for, and they've already mentioned, when He comes, He will do greater works than any of the other prophets. He'll do more powerful works than Moses, than Elijah. He'll do more powerful works. That's how they will know He's the Messiah. So now, they're going to ask Him, okay, if you are the Messiah, how about proving it to us? Now you might say, well, hadn't He already proven it? In other words, you look at all of this stuff that He did and all this massive amount of bread and everything that He created, and doesn't that do it? Nope, nope. Not to us Jews. And here's the reason why. Look, Jesus, what you did was a big thing. But let me tell you what Moses did. Moses had fed the people in Israel manna from heaven for 40 years. Now, there were millions of people out there in the wilderness, and Moses fed millions of people every day for 40 years. You only fed 5,000 one meal. Show us you're the Messiah. Do you see the argument? So now, this is what he's coming into this now. This is what he's going to answer them that's there. So it says, they said in 31, our fathers ate the manna in the wilderness, as it is written, He gave them bread out of heaven to eat. Jesus therefore said unto them, Verily, verily, I say unto you, it was not Moses that gave you the bread out of heaven, but my Father giveth you the true bread out of heaven. It wasn't Moses, it was God. And we're not going to argue about that. It's God still giving you this bread. Now then, God's going to give you the true bread, the eternal bread, the bread that will give you eternal life. So the Father's going to give you this. For the bread of God is that which cometh down out of heaven and giveth life unto the world. So now here's the new bread that God has given. The new bread is me. See, that's what he's saying. This new bread is me. It's the one that came out of heaven. They said therefore unto him, Lord, evermore give us this bread. Give us this bread, Lord. Now does that sound like the woman at the well? What did she say when he said, if you drink this water, you'll never thirst? Give it to me, so I won't ever have to come back up here again. See? Okay, that's what they're saying. Give it to us. See, this bread. Jesus saith unto him, I am the bread. In other words, the bread is standing right before you. And you're saying, give us this bread. And look, I am the bread. Do you see how it would go over if you're standing there and talking? And they can't see it. He's trying to get them to see it that's in there. And so he said, I am the bread of life. He that cometh unto me shall not hunger, and he that believeth on me shall never thirst. But I said unto you that you have seen me, and yet believe not. You've seen me. You've seen the kind of man I am. You've seen what I've done. Even though you have seen me, even though you have witnessed me, you do not believe in me. See? All that which the Father giveth me shall come unto me, and him that cometh to me I will in no wise cast out. For I am come down from heaven, not to do my own will, but the will of him that sent me. And this is the will of him that sent me, that of all that which he hath given me, I should lose nothing, but should raise it up in the last day. Now, here it is. Jesus is talking in this from physical to the spiritual. And I'm sure if I'd have been standing there, I would have been confused too, see, as you're looking at this. People, I think somebody asked me last week, why didn't Jesus just come out and say it? You see. Well, there's a number of reasons that you wouldn't do it, why you would do something like this. But even if he comes out and says it, it won't solve the problem, because when they said, give us this bread, what was his answer? What did he tell them? I am the bread. Here it is. It'd be just like if up here's a loaf of bread and I'm telling Steve, eat the bread and it'll save your life. And Steve says, well, where is the bread? There is the bread, you see. But Steve still won't come up and get it. It's in there. Would it tell you a little bit about him? See? Now, that's what it's doing here. He's drawing them out. He's showing their character. He's going to keep doing this to show them. Now, there's another reason why you teach in these ways. That when you just tell somebody the facts of life, they tend to forget it. But if you tell them in a way that catches their attention, that they don't understand, they don't ever forget it. See? Then you'd never forget it. That's what figurative language is all about, isn't it? See? In doing that. So it's a good teaching technique that he's got, and he's getting ready now to go through this whole conversation that I want to get through tonight, and so we'll probably never look at this chapter again the same, and we'll see the whole thing fits together. This fits together with the feeding of the 5,000. All right? He said, now the Father has sent me in here. He said, I've come down, and the Father will draw people to me. Whoever the Father draws to me. Man, who would it be? What is it? Now let me deter here for a minute, because this is a bad thing. It's bad. We're living in a society where religious teachers have taken passages and totally corrupt them, turn them around so that the world believes it, and we have to stop and say, now this isn't true because of this or this. And it breaks up a story, doesn't it, when you're telling a story. Now, Jesus is starting this story, and he's saying, now, everybody that the Father draws and gives to me, I will not lose. See? Okay, now the Father's going to draw in here. So now, people in today's culture will say, see, God reaches in your heart and He draws you, and there's nothing you can do. We're talking about Calvinism, aren't we? See, He draws you, He gives you to Christ, and so forth, and it's a mystic thing. No, it's not. No, it's not. He's going to tell us how He draws. See, how He draws. He's going to explain it to us. So don't get in your mind this drawing that God does, that God just draws certain people to Christ, and then they come. Now, God does draw just certain people to Christ. He does do that. See? And only the people God draws will come. Let me illustrate this. Suppose I want all of you up here on the stage with me. And Bill Gates gave me several $1 million checks today, and if you'll come up, I'm going to give you a $1 million check. And so I say, now here's what I want to do. The people now that I'm going to draw in here, I want to draw you up so you'll come up here. And so I'm asking you to come, and everybody just sits there. If I took ropes and I threw everybody a rope, and I said, now grab a hold of the rope, and I'm going to draw you up here. And so I start pulling on the rope. Oliver, he's a cynical. He's not going to be made a fool of, so he throws his rope down. I'm not going to listen to Lowell, So he throws his rope down. Denise, she grabs hold of it tight. Betty gets it tight. Linda obviously wouldn't have anything to do with it. So it gets here. And so we get through, and 4 of you have held onto your rope, and I pulled you up here. The rest of you are still sitting there. Now, did I draw you up? Yeah, I drew you up. I pulled it. I drew you up. But now, did I force it on you? Was there something you had to do to get drawn? I throw you the rope and ask you to do something, and if you do it, I pull you up. See? And I'm not forcing anything on you. That's what God's going to do. God is going to throw out His Word, His gospel. He's going to throw it out, and who all does He invite to come? Who all is He trying to come? Who all does He try to tug on their heartstrings, try to convince them? Everybody. Well, the people that are convinced, they're going to come. They're going to come because God is drawing them through His teaching. The people who don't come, no, God didn't draw them. But whose fault is it? You see, that's really what is going to happen. Now let's see here how he describes it that's in here. Okay, now then in verse 40. For this is the will of my Father, that every one that beholdeth the Son and believeth on Him should have eternal life, and I will raise him up at the last day. So this is God's will. Now what's God's will? How many people are involved in God's will that God wants saved? Everybody who beholds and believes. Those are the ones God's going to save, right? See, not going to save everybody, but He's going to save them. He said, then, the Jews therefore murmured concerning Him. So they started complaining, because He said, I am the bread which cometh down out of heaven. So they got that on their mind. What does He mean, He's the bread coming down out of heaven? I'm going to hear, did you hear that? And so now then, they're starting to murmur about Him making that statement. And they said, now they're going to argue with Jesus again. They've already had one argument with Him, haven't they? In other words, here's what Moses did. Can you live up to that? Can you do something better than that? Now then, Jesus said, I am the bread. Now then, they know they've got Him. So then they came back to Him, and they said, is this not Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? Isn't this the same guy? He was raised out here. We know him. We know his mom and dad. We know where he came from. And it says here, then, how doth he now say, I am come down out of heaven? We know he's not. We know where he came from. See? So they're arguing with him. Jesus answered and said unto them, murmur not among yourself. No man can come to me except the Father that sent me draw him. So now he's talking to these people who are murmuring. Don't get in a fight. Don't argue about that. I told you now that God has to draw, but now then I'm going to tell you another little thing. None of you, nobody can come to me except God draws him to me. Those are the only ones of you or anybody else who can come to me. This would fit us the same. But he's talking to those people. And so he's telling them, don't murmur. I just want to tell you that very thing. Then he explains it. Verse 45. As it is written in the prophets. He said it's right in your own scriptures. And they shall all be taught of God. And every one that hath heard from the Father and hath learned cometh unto me. Now, pretty clear. You can't come to me unless God draws you. Just that simple. Now, this is what the prophet said. The prophet says in here that God will teach everybody. God is not going to hold back His word from anybody. God's going to teach everybody. And a person that hears, when you hear it, that still doesn't mean you're going to come to me. What else do you have to do? He that heareth and hath learned. You see, I am who I say I am. I am who God says I am, then you come to me. So that's what you have to do. God will teach, send out His gospel. You have to hear it, and you have to understand it, believe it, and you'll come to Him. Then He teaches them this, how important it is. He said, not that any man hath seen the Father, save he that is from God, he hath seen the Father. In other words, now, when I say God teaches you, this is what Jesus is saying. When I say God teaches you, I'm not saying that you've ever seen God. And there's ever been that direct teaching. The teaching has been through the prophets and Moses and me and everybody like this he's saying in here. He said, the only one who's ever seen the Father is me, the one who came down from Him. I just came down from the Father, you see, is what he's saying that's in here. Now, he said, verily, verily, I say unto you, he that believeth, if you believe that, you understand, I came down from the Father, I hath eternal life. I am the bread of life. Your fathers ate the manna in the wilderness, and they died. This is the bread that cometh down out of heaven, that a man may eat thereof and not die. Look up here at me just a moment. I can just visualize what Jesus is saying. He's saying, the people ate manna in the wilderness for 40 years and they died. This is the bread of life. You eat me and you'll never die. See? You know, did Jesus just stand there and talk? You eat me and you'll never die? Or was he talking with them? See, there was this thing going back and forth. And he understood it. When we read it, sometimes we'll miss something like this. So, I am the bread of life. He's pointing that out in there. And so, you do this, you'll never die. 51. I am the living bread, which cometh down out of heaven. If any man eat of this bread, he shall live forever. Yea, and the bread which I will give is my flesh for the life of the world. So I'm going to give my flesh for the life of the world. I'm going to die for you, is really what he's saying in here, but of course they don't know that now. Now the Jews therefore strove one with another, saying, how can this man give us his flesh to eat? Now I would ask that same question too, wouldn't you? How can he give us the flesh to eat? He wants us to eat his flesh. So now here's where this language now is going to come in. Jesus therefore said unto them, verily, verily, I say unto you, except you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have not life in yourself. He that eateth my flesh and drinketh my blood hath eternal life, and I will raise him up the last day. So now then he even adds his blood. You've got to eat my flesh and drink my blood. Now to a Jew, what would that mean? You got to drink my blood. They were always prohibited for that. And the reason is because the life is in the blood. Now Jesus is asking them to drink his blood. I want you to absorb my life. This is what he's talking about, and we're going to see he's talking figuratively in just a minute. But I want you to absorb my life within you in here. 55. For my flesh is meat indeed, and my blood is drink indeed. He that eateth my flesh and drinketh my blood abideth in me, and I in him. As the living Father sent me, I live because of the Father, and he that eateth me, he shall live because of me. So I've come down to you, and the reason I have life is because of the Father, and the reason you have life is because you're going to eat me, and I'm a life-giving being. See? Well, they're still confused in here. 58. This is the bread which came down out of heaven. So again, you see, he'd be pointing to himself. This is the bread which came down out of heaven, not as the fathers ate and died, not that physical bread. He that eateth this bread shall live forever. And you can see him pointing to himself again. Here it is. You eat me, you'll live forever. Now these things saith he in the synagogue as he taught in Capernaum. So the speech is over. You think there'd be any confusion? Yeah, there's going to be some confusion. What in the world? Oh, that's what it sounds like. So that's what they would think. Yeah, he is way out there. He's not only talking about cannibalism, he's talking about violating Moses' command of not drinking blood and so forth. So 60, many therefore of his disciples, when they heard this, said, this is a hard saying. Who can hear it? Who can accept such teaching as this? It can't be taught. But Jesus, knowing in himself that his disciples murmured at this, said unto them, now he knows that they don't have it, so he comes back. He said, doth this cause you to stumble when I give you a teaching like this? What if you should behold the Son of Man ascending where he was before? Now this is just kind of a question. Let's put this back in context. He's talking to them. They're talking to him. They said, it's a hard saying. Who can understand it? And Jesus said, does this cause you to stumble? What would happen to you if you saw me go back where I came from? If this causes you to stumble, you'd probably faint, huh? I mean, what did some of them see him go back to where he came from? Yeah. But that's the reason he asked that question. Hey, what he's saying is, look, what I'm teaching you is so simple. If you stumble over this, what would you do if you actually saw me do that, you see? And then he goes ahead and he says, now he said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to explain to you what I'm talking about. The whole explanation is in this next verse. But remember after I told you to grab a hold of a verse and don't forget it because we're going to come down again? What was the work of God? What is it that he's trying to get him to do? What's the one thing, the only thing, the big thing that's in this chapter? What do? Believe in me. Now then, he said, let me explain what I'm saying. It is the Spirit that giveth life. The flesh profiteth nothing. So if you were to take me and eat my flesh, you would have no profit whatsoever. Wouldn't do you any more good than if you ate a rabbit. See? He said, it is the Spirit that gives life. The flesh profiteth nothing. The words that I have spoken unto you are spirit and are life. That's what I'm trying to get you to see. The words that I have spoken to you, they are spirit and they are life. Now this is a big thing, but it's a beautiful thing. Let's just take me. Take you. You look up here at me, and you're seeing me, and if I eat a hamburger today, does that hamburger give me any nourishment? It does, doesn't it? It nourishes my physical body. Now, what does that hamburger have to do, or what does my body have to do in order to get any nourishment out of that hamburger? I have to eat it first, right? And then if I eat it, do I have to digest it? I've got to digest it, or it won't do me any good. And if I digest it, and the nourishment goes out through there, does all of my cells, everything have to assimilate it? Do they have to get strength? They do, see? This hamburger will give life to my physical body. How long will it last? Till about bedtime. I need another hamburger, see? Now, up here above my neck, right here, up here is another thing. See? I'm not just down here, but up here's another thing. And inside what you see up here is a real creature. It's a real living thing. It's a spirit. See? It's a spirit. Just as much as an angel is a spirit. It's a spirit. And now I need that spirit fed. Up here's what God is trying to get me to do. He's trying to get me to turn my mind to Him, to believe on Christ. That's what happens up here. Oh, I know, we do it with our brain. But, wait just a minute. If a person has a brain, does that mean he can think and analyze? No, it takes more than just a brain in there. There's a lot of people with a brain that are in comas, right? They can't do anything. See? There's a lot of dead people that still have brains. When a person dies, do they still have a brain? But they don't have a spirit. See? Now, that spirit is up here. And we've got to feed that spirit. And this is what Jesus is trying to get them to see. When you ate the manna, it fed your body and you still died. But if you will eat me, if you will take me, if you will take Jesus, you take Christ, and you put Him into your spirit, you eat Him, you digest Him, you assimilate Him, you fill everything in your life, in your spirit, with Him, so that finally your spirit becomes like Christ. Your spirit thinks like Christ. Your spirit talks like Christ. Your spirit is becoming like Christ. Now, if you will do that, what's going to happen to you in the last day? You're going to be raised up and you're going to live forever. And so he said, I want you to understand, I'm not talking about the flesh. Flesh profiteth nothing. I'm talking about your spirit. It's the spirit that gives life up here to this spirit, and the words are spirit. Now, when you talk about words again, what is a word? If I say akabahamba, what did it do to you? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Words are something that give you thoughts, aren't they? See, it gives you a thought, gives you an idea. And so if I make a statement, I say scriptures. Now you have a picture, you have an idea. I say something that you can convert into ideas. What are you doing? Where are those ideas going? See? They're going into your mind, into your spirit. Those words are the spiritual life that gives you eternal life. Now you can go 1,000 different places. Go ye into all the world, preach the gospel to every creature, and what will happen? He that believeth, believeth what? Believeth the gospel. Believeth the words. Believeth the words that comes from the Christ. He shall be saved. See? What is it Paul said saves you? That the gospel which I preach, see, is what saves you. And so you can go all different ways, but it's those words. That's what goes into your spirit and changes your spirit, changes your mind, and makes you like Christ. So that's what he's saying. He's saying, that's the point I want you to see. I want you to see we're not just fooling around. I want you to see we're not just nibbling around the edges. Not just doing that. We're not doing like a lot of people do with a pizza. You order a pizza and they just eat a little bit around the crust. Just break off a little bit around there. Put the other away. My wife and I goes out somewhere and maybe we get something and she's not a big eater and she'll just eat a little bit. And I wonder, what in the world you even order it for if that's all you're going to eat, see? Not going to do you any good. You look at me and you don't find that problem. Bum, 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 bum. I mean, I eat it up, you see. This is what Jesus is saying. He's saying, eat me up. Eat all of me. Take all of me. Don't just fool around, you see, about it like you would do with physical food. Now, I want to finish this real quickly in here. He said, but there are some of you that do not believe. So now he's going to charge some of the people there. Some of you are unbelievers, and he's going to work on that. For Jesus knew from the beginning who they were that believed not, and who it was that should betray him. He knew about Judah. He knew the other people that he had that really didn't believe on him. And he said, for this cause have I come unto you, that no man can come unto me except the Father, except it be given him of the Father. So just mark it down again, what I've just got through telling you. I've come to you to make a distinction about those that believe and those that don't, and nobody can come unless the Father that sent me draw him. But we've talked about that. Now upon this, many of his disciples went back and walked no more with him. So he's had thousands. This is the apex of his success. Thousands of people following him. Now then they walk back and say, this is just too much. This is cannibalism. Jesus therefore looked over at the 12 and he said, would you also go away? Now in the Greek, you can ask a question, and kind of like English, it's like this. You wouldn't also go away, would you? And you're wanting a no answer, right? See, if I said, would you also go away? You wouldn't go away, would you? You're wanting a no answer. That's what he says here, in here. You're not also going to go away, are you? In other words, but it's a choice. Jesus is not changing. Then Simon Peter answered him, Lord, to whom should we go? Thou hast the words of eternal life, and we have believed and know that thou art the Holy One of God. Now, Peter has already made this confession up at Caesarea Philippi, as we talked about at the beginning of class. He has seen all these miracles. He's been on the boat. He's seen Jesus walk in water. They're not about to turn around and leave him right now. He said, and we have believed and know thou art the Holy One of God. Jesus answered them, did not I choose you, the 12, and one of you is a devil? Now Jesus is starting to work on Judas right now. One of you is a devil. Now he spake of Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, for it was he that should betray him, being one of the 12. Now, why did he say, I choose you and one of you is a devil? Well, he doesn't tell us, but I'm pretty sure that when you put two and two together, you come up with an answer. And that is that people ask, did Judas have to betray Jesus? See? Did he have to betray Jesus in there? What did he do? Now I'm going to ask you a question. What did Jesus do for Simon, or for Judas, to get him to come to him? What did he do that he didn't do for the 12, other 11? Or what did he do for the other 11 that he didn't do for the 12, for him? He did the same thing, didn't he? Gave him all the teaching. Then there's a little bit more. A little bit more. There you have the 12 men. One of them is a robber. One of them is a cheat. He's been that way all of his life. Scripture says so. He's been stealing out of the money bag, and Jesus has let him carry the money bag, and he's been stealing out of it. Does he know the kind of guy he is? Now Jesus then takes all these people. All these thousands turn away from him. He turns to the 12 and says, would you also go? And they also stay. Then he looks at the 12. One of you is a devil. Let's go to Jerusalem. You suppose that might have pricked Judas's mind? Don't forget that. It's going to come in handy again. Class dismissed.